Hey guys, Tom here, Throwing Wrenches Garage, and we're not actually throwing wrenches so much today. It's more like throwing hammers and saws and paintbrushes, and that's because we're working on the garage this week instead of working on the cars. The reason for that is, as they say in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. It is New England. We are getting there. It's at the end of October. Halloween is this week, and the temperatures are already starting to drop on us. Now, today's going to be a nice day, but earlier this week it was in the 50s, which is totally normal for this area and this time of year. But my garage is largely uninsulated. Words are hard. So we're trying to get this thing buttoned up and insulated so that Declan and I can work a little bit more, a little deeper into the season inside the garage and on the cars. So I've been working, I took the week off from work, which is why, no shave this week. So I've been working in here while Declan's in school, trying to get this thing buttoned up, got some insulation on the walls, got some OSB up on the walls, and now it's on for some of the next steps. So I'm going to take you around on a little tour of the horror show that is currently the garage. So this is what she looks like right now. So you can see I have managed to get some insulation and OSB up on all the walls. I have just basically been playing a game of moving stuff around inside the garage. The Chevelle's out in the driveway. Moved a bunch of stuff around, put some stuff up on the walls, then moved stuff back around, put some stuff up on the other walls, and we have now gotten to the point where it's all set. OSB up on all the walls, and some insulation up behind all of those. And now we're left with just this sort of horrific mess. As you hear me bumping a table here, there's a lot of slop in here and a lot of garbage. So now it's time to clean up. Next steps for me is I do really have to get some paint up on these walls. When I say paint, what I really mean is primer. We're going to use Kills and just get some white up on all these walls. I really just want a uniform color up on the walls, and I think it's also going to be good for you guys. When you see it on camera, the white's just going to make it a little bit brighter in here, which hopefully will make it a little bit easier to see everything when it shows up on video. But what we also need to do before I even get into painting is just get this space cleaned up and more organized. So the next things up on the list for me today is to make sure I get all of this stuff cleaned up. Now, I've been using this garage for a lot of things since we moved into this place several years ago. I had it really set up as sort of a workshop for wood. I've really retired a lot of that stuff out of here, and then really had a lot of automotive stuff in here. There's been all sorts of crap in this place since we moved in. I really need to get that reorganized. So what I'm gonna be doing as I go through all of this stuff is chucking a lot of stuff, putting a lot of stuff that is sort of house related and sort of woodworking related in bins and storing it in the basement, and then just keeping everything that's really automotive that I want to just keep as garage stuff and getting that into separate totes so that we can store it later. And then finally, once we get all the paint up on the walls and we're ready to sort of organize, that's when Declan's really going to step in, because he's really good at and really enjoys organizing. So that's what I think we're going to take you through in a little bit more of a detailed view later on, is when we start to get all of this stuff, all of the toolboxes and all of the bins and all the crates arranged in a way that's going to make sense for us in a shop. And that's what I think is going to be interesting for you guys as a video, is when we start talking about how we're going to lay everything out so that it makes sense for us as a shop, so that we can work around in here. Because this is a small space, which I think is what a lot of you guys are dealing with. It's a fairly small space to work in. And so we'll talk a little bit about what it takes to work in a small space and how you can use that space to the best of your advantage. So stick around, and hopefully this is going to be interesting and maybe a little bit valuable for you. Well, we're a little cleaned up. I managed to get most of the stuff out of the middle of the floor so we can kind of see that as we walk around here. Spin you around, don't throw up, don't get sick. But most of the stuff is out of the middle of the floor. It's swept up, it's clean. We've kind of pushed the big stuff out into the middle now, and now it's time to paint. It's gonna take a couple of coats for sure of this stuff to be able to get the walls covered. So I wanna get that started now. I'm hoping to get a couple of coats up today, because once the coats of paint go up and I can let the paint dry out a little bit, that's when we can start the organizing. That's when we'll actually do real video of this thing and show you guys what we're doing. Because that's when it'll start to get interesting and when we can sort of share our thought process and what we're doing. So for now, we're just gonna be using Kills. I can show you what that is right here. Is this Kills brand primer. This stuff, in my experience, works pretty well for this kind of stuff. It's gonna soak into this stuff like crazy, but it's also going to completely coat it. Use a regular primer and all the paint marks from the stampings and everything is all gonna show through. This stuff usually does a pretty good job of getting in there and coating, and I can kind of slop it on. This is not gonna be real pretty. We're gonna go heavy, so enjoy the time lapse and whatever cheesy background music I pick. Was anything outside, but I did manage to get some success today. We got paint, or more accurately, primer up on the walls. So if you follow me around, we got some success. All the walls covered. We got paint up on the walls. I'm doing this without a mic, which is going off the phone, because in my brilliance, I actually packed the mics in one of the millions of totes that I've got around here to sort of organize everything. But you can definitely see we're much, much brighter in here now with these white walls. So hopefully it's going to be a little bit better when it comes to filming. And it's going to be definitely a lot easier for us to see stuff in here as we work as well. So good start. Let me show you around a little. So pretty much this entire space previously was just open walls. So you can see over the right side here where the welding helmets are hanging. That was already covered because that's the part that abuts the basement. So that part sort of by code had to be covered in originally, but the rest of this was all just open to the outside. So it's not closed in. We've got it insulated. It's all backed, insulated, panels up, and we've got a couple of coats of Kills on all of these walls, which really just kind of makes the whole space nice and cleaned up. There is a bunch of stuff that sort of has to be here, like the garage door openers, and the gas line, the propane line that needs to be there, but everything else is sort of negotiable. for tonight. We'll be starting again tomorrow, and that will be me in the beginning in the morning, because Declan's got school, so he can't help me in the morning. But I'll be coming back in here to do some more organization. I've done a bunch of it already. You can see sort of the totes hanging out behind me in the background. Those totes are just full of the stuff that I've managed to pull out of the garage and just sort of throw in there for now. I'm going to have to start going through a bunch of that stuff to figure out what of that stuff belongs in here and what of it really just belongs in the basement. That's not needed as much. That's not car stuff. So we're going to go through all that stuff and figure out what needs to stay in here and then what needs a place. It's a big piece of organization that I have found in my travels and my experience is the best way to try to keep things organized is make sure that everything you're going to keep has a place. If it doesn't have a place, you're going to have a mess. So that's rule number one. So that's what we're going to start on tomorrow. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing this morning before I go off and do a couple other errands today is I'm going to hang up some more lights. So I picked up a couple more of these shop lights. I love light. If you guys haven't been able to figure that out from me painting the walls white and seeing how much lighting I have in this garage, you sort of can't have enough light as far as I'm concerned. So I picked up a few more of these shop lights to really bathe this area in more light. So I'm going to hang up a couple of more of those, a few more of those. I can get 3. We'll just do a little time lapse thing on those, and you'll see those going up. And then it's time to organize. So I've got all of these bins, and what I'm going to be doing is pulling out all of the bins that need to go into the basement to get stored. That's all the stuff that's like home improvement stuff. And then I'm going to be saving all of the stuff that needs to stay in the garage. And then we're going to lay those out and figure out which stuff needs to stay in here and what I have to find places for so that we can figure out what I need in order to get hung up on the walls and organized in this space. So lights first, that's coming now. I pulled Declan into this. He's got some plans for tonight, so I'm going to be like continuing on chugging along on my own here, but I kind of brought Declan in for a little bit of reality check, and I kind of thought I would bring you guys into this too, to start talking about what we're going to do with the garage. Sometimes when you get into your own head and start thinking about how you're going to lay things out, you can kind of get stuck in your own perspective and then screw things up and then do things that don't make any sense because you didn't look for a fresh perspective. So I'm kind of trying to avoid doing that. So I brought Declan in here, so we're just going to kind of talk this through. So we used to have that big bench on the back wall, and the big problem that I had with that was that it took up too much space in the back wall. So we didn't have, you know how we used to have to sort of scooch between the front bumper and the car. So I don't want to have to do that. So I wanted to be able to make sure that that wall stays mostly clear. So I didn't want to put a bunch of stuff on that back wall for a bench. So the bench is not going to go back there. We're going to leave it. And then I thought that means we can throw all the cabinets and stuff on this wall, which makes sense to me. And then I really thought putting these big cabinets back here made the most sense because this is deep back. We don't have to pull anything from the back to the front. Remember how every time we had to grab like the floor jack or like the wash buckets, you'd have to like pull them from the back past the cars?
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Because it was always a hassle to pull anything from like deep back in the garage past the cars. So that's why I've got the, I don't know if you guys can see it in the shot here, but I've got like we've got a cart for car wash stuff, the little cart that we use for holding tools, a little caddy, the car floor jack, and then we've also got jack stands and car wash buckets that are on wheels. I'm gonna leave those all towards the front because I think it'll be easier to scooch them out of the garage when we need to. We don't have to drag them past everything. Does that make sense to you too? I kind of hung the wire roll up out of the way because we don't go to that all the time. No. So that's not a big deal to keep out of the way.
Never touched that.
I decided to hang the little container, the organizer we have for bolts and nuts back there. I'm going to get another one and hang it next to that because we actually need more storage for those. And then the rack for all the power tools. I'm actually going to get more hangers for underneath that rack for the weird tools, like this won't fit on that rack. So I've got to get some other hanger to hang this by. So I'll get more hangers to put underneath that to hang them off the wall. And all the chargers are zip tied on there, so they're not going anywhere. So we have all the chargers. So that's pretty organized. I do want to get a TV for in here, like a bigger one than what we have. And I was going to put it on that back wall, but then I started thinking if we're working on the cars back here, I just kind of envisioned us like moving stuff out of the cars and then turning around and then smacking a TV with it. And so I thought it was a bad idea to leave it exposed out here. So I think I'm going to put it like right behind where you are.
Be better.
Because it's a little bit more protected over there. And I also can't use that space because I figured if we have a bench there, it's going to be harder to reach over the bench for stuff. So it's less usable space. What do you think?
Makes sense so far.
This plan sounds good to you?
Yeah, you're not going crazy yet.
I'm not yet. Yet being the operative word. I still have to find a place to hang like the creeper. To be able to mount we want to hang the creeper up someplace so that's easy to get to.
Make sure that when you put the hangers on that you can still open that door.
I did actually. I did a measurement for this. I'm going to double check it. Make sure it's still opening, but I did do a measurement on it.
Okay.
So I measured that to make sure the door would still open.
You weren't dumb.
Well, I may have been dumb about a lot of things, but I did actually take that measurement to make sure that that would work.
Okay.
So, did you notice I put more lights in?
I thought it was a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I put 3 more lights in. So now we have like an embarrassing amount of lights in here. This is a lot of shop lighting in here. And the only other thing I might want to do is maybe later I'll put a couple more in above the door. So that when the door is closed, because you don't notice it now when the door is open because it's letting lots of light in, but when the door is closed, there'll be a big dark spot here. So that we might want to fill out. So that might still potentially happen.
I don't know if you have enough lighting.
I like light. My eyes are bad now. So the older I get, the more I like good light. All right. Well, what you're seeing around behind me is the fruits of what I guess 4 solid days worth of labor. It was a fair amount of work to get this done, but we're now standing inside a garage and I'm feeling much, much better about working in. I got to be perfectly honest with you, this actually consumed way more of my time and energy than I was expecting. I did try to take a lot of footage while we were working, but I'm not 100% sure how much of it came out. So this is going to be a little bit of a crapshoot when I go to edit this thing and we'll see what I get. But I am going to take you around a little bit now through the garage to try to show you what I did kind of step by step and share some of those little tips and tricks that I've done in here to try to keep things organized for the way that I run this garage. Maybe you'll pick up a few little things. This is a tiny space. Realistically speaking, this is only a little 2-car garage, so this is not a big, gigantic space. I'll get some measurements and throw that up for you guys so you can see how big it is. But it's 2 cars, 1 big, wide door. There is a little bit of space, probably about 4 feet of space on one side and probably only about 2 feet of space on the other side. So it's not gigantic. Big enough to fit 2 cars in here, certainly big enough for parking, but not a lot of room for working around. So let me take you on a little tour right now and show you what we did. So I'd like to be able to tell you that we're completely all done, but we're not. There's still a bunch of things that need to be squared away, picked up, and put away. But we'll start right over here in this corner, largely untouched, right? We really kind of left that alone, sort of a utility corner. We really just got it buttoned up. But we're not really touching that too much. It's just where we're storing the engine hoist. But this back wall is really the first place where we really did something different. Right? So we took off the big bench that was sitting here, took off the giant set of peg wall that was sitting here. That toolbox that's currently sitting on the floor was sitting on that bench. We got rid of that. So this wall now feels a lot better as an empty space because it's going to give us all this room here, this walkway here, is now a workspace that we can use when both cars are pulled in. And that's a big thing for us in the wintertime, right? It's going to give us a little bit of room to move around and to work around in once we have the cars in the space, and that's kind of huge. We need that room in here when we can't just crank the doors open and move stuff out. I do use these power strips. I got these industrial grade power strips. I can't even remember when or where I got them, but I got them a while ago. And I use these things. They come in really handy for stuff like this. So I managed to get these wire racks. This is one of those Amazon deals. If somebody's really interested in it, I could look it up and tell you where I got them. They're nothing special. They were cheapies, but they do a decent job of holding the drills in place. They don't necessarily do a great job of holding all the other stuff in place, but they do hold the drills in place pretty well, and a lot of the sort of stick type Milwaukee stuff, I'm sure they'd hold other things too. And what I was able to do with all the chargers that I've got for these things is to be able to fasten these down with zip ties. So these things are all locked down with zip ties. I've tried mounting these to a board with screws in the past. Doesn't really work very well because the motion of just sort of taking these things out of there and putting them back in tends to work them off the screws. So I don't like using those. I like to be able to have these things really strapped down so I can grab these things in and out. This multi-pack charger, this is a real lifesaver because otherwise I'd be using a bunch of these chargers. This thing is actually bolted to the wall. So this is on those keyhole screws, and this works really great. All of those wires, I just tried to do as neat a job as I could wire tying all these wires together, sort of loomed them together and ran them over. Someday, maybe I'll do something nicer with this, but right now it's just kind of keeping things neat and clean for the moment until I figure out something a little bit more elegant. I still got more tools to hang up over here, but some of the tools that don't hang very well, I've managed to hang down below. That'll be my plan with a couple of the others that we need to hang in there as well. And then we've still got room if I need more tools to hang up here or down below. I've still got that opportunity to hang them. So that's still an option for me. And then over here, we got our cabinets. Cabinets are really just for, I've got paint supplies in one, I've got cleaners in another, and oil and other supplies. There's also some tools that are sitting in one of those as well. We decided to move those things up here because nothing really happens here. Those things get to stay stationary when they're over here, and they don't get in the way of anything. This is really tucked up in the back corner of the garage when you think about it, once the cars are in here. So once the vehicles are in this garage, in this part of the garage, this is kind of no man's land. So I've realized before, just from haphazardly arranging the garage, that if I have stuff in this corner of the garage and I need to get to the other corner of the garage, I've got to navigate around the car. Which means I'm going to bang it into stuff. It's going to be hairy to move it around. So it made sense to try to put things in these deep corners of the garage that I was never really going to have to navigate out of the garage very much or at all. Or if I was, to keep it small, like tools, hand tools. So that was the logic for keeping that there. And now let's look around to what I've got coming up next here. Very messy station here. We are in the midst of sort of cleaning this up. Even though this kind of looks like hell now, it is getting organized. So I do think I'm going to end up having to get a new toolbox. This bad boy just is not big enough anymore. I've got way too much crap and not enough space. I do think it's going to have to get bigger because I think I'm going to have to sort of get rid of that guy and consolidate and move more things into one, but not today. So these two boxes together, this is basically a workspace. So this bench is the one workbench we're going to keep in here. I really want to try to keep as few horizontal spaces in this space as I can. And the logic is, and I think you guys know this, or hopefully I'm not the only person who's experienced this, in a workshop, any horizontal space is going to turn into a cluster in a matter of minutes, right? It's a place where you put things down, and the more horizontal spaces that you leave in your shop, the more opportunity there is for messes. So I don't want to leave a lot of horizontal spaces open and vulnerable in this shop to being able to put things down. So I want to get strip down as much as I can. I've got plenty of collapsible tables, folding tables that I can use if I need to as workbenches, and I'm going to try to rely on that. So when I need something, I can go and grab it, but if I don't need it, then I don't want to have it out. It'll sort of force me to try to put things away and not leave things sitting out and clustered. But this workbench I actually like a lot. This thing has been working pretty well for me. We do have some extra power running, or some extra circuits running here. I've tried to set up these lights and see if you guys can see all this. I've got banks of lights running in here. So one of the things that's missing right now, these are all just running on plugs. This is not hardwired stuff. Each one of the banks is sort of running off the max that you can, which is 3 lights, I think. So they're all running on 3 light banks. They are just plugged in right now. So what I need to get is some sort of Bluetooth light switches, which I know are out there, where you can sort of plug them into a receiver that goes into the outlet. And then they have a Bluetooth light switch that can go elsewhere that you can flip on and off, so that I can get those things turned on and off when I need them. So I'm going to be looking for those tonight online. So we still have a little bit more cleaning and organizing to do. You can see I've got some tools here that need to find their home. I'm going to have to find some peg hook hangers and stuff for hammers and mallets that need to be put away. I do still need to figure out a thing to do with this vacuum. This is a car vac that I do use fairly regularly. It needs to find a home near an outlet. So there's some tricky things like that that need to be done, finding places near outlets and finding a shelf for some electronics to recharge. It's going to be a little bit on the tricky side, but I really think it's ultimately going to be just about sort of building a shelf near one of these power strips and calling it a day. I think that'll just get us out of a lot of trouble. One of the other things that we did here is we did salvage some of that pegboard. I didn't want to do it, but when I was talking with Declan earlier today, as we were talking, I realized that some of this stuff, cutoff wheels, tape, etc., if you don't hang it in a way like this, then it's really just going to take up a drawer in a cabinet. And I didn't want to do that, because now it's more cabinets. I realized that this is probably the most efficient way to do it. So we still have plenty of room on here to add more stuff, which is good. You want to have a little bit, at least in my experience, a little bit of room to expand. Because if you don't have room to expand, then as soon as you bring in something new, it's just clutter and you have to reorganize again. So we've got plenty of room here to be able to hang some grinding discs, plenty of room for cutoff wheels, plenty of room for a bunch of different types of tapes. And some wire discs. We're missing one of our respirators. I'm not sure where that is. You would have thought I would found it in all of this cleaning, but I didn't find it. And I'm sure we're going to unearth some other things. What's amazing about all of this is that this board was like full and it was twice this size. It's now mostly empty because a lot of stuff that was hanging on here was garbage, and stuff that was really just sort of house-related stuff and stuff that is just, I just stuck it up here. Didn't really need it, didn't really use it a lot. So glad we went through this sort of purge. Declan and I did talk about the air compressor and where to put it. Ultimately, I did find a place to put it, and I kind of decided that this was not a bad spot. So the deal with this particular position, it's kind of a no man's land. There's not a lot going on over here. I did hang the wire rack up on the wall here. It's where the garage door opener lives. This spot is not going to get used all that often, but it is probably a decent spot to be able to hang this thing if all we need to do is fill tires with air and stuff like that. Ultimately, I just didn't want to find another home for this thing. That was going to be a pain in the neck to try to find another place to store this, and I ultimately knew that coiling up the cord or the hose every time I was using it was going to get old real fast. So I figured might as well just hang this thing on the wall. It just so happens that there was a stud lined up on the wall right where I needed it to hang that. So it was pretty easy to make that call to hang it. We cleaned up the compressor a little bit, snapped that in place, and it plugs into the wall very conveniently there. So all in all, not a bad call to set that up. And so that's what we've got set up now. You can see there's tons of light in here now. This is a much brighter space to work now, just between adding in some extra lights and getting the white on the wall. It's a much more pleasant space to work in brightness-wise. But we've also got insulation on these walls. So even though today it was in the 70s here and really pleasant, so I had the door open all day, we already can notice that once we have the door closed in here, it's holding its temperature a lot better. So this is a much nicer space now. We'll just have to worry about getting a little bit of a space heater so that we can warm the space up when we are working here, and then we should be much better off. So I think all in, I just did a little bit of calculation for the whole space, the wall board, the screws, the insulation. I keep calling it wall board. It's OSB. It's oriented strand board. The OSB, the insulation, the screws, the kills. It was a gallon plus a half gallon that I had sitting around. Everything all in, just under 500 bucks. Not a crazy amount of money, and it got this whole space insulated, closed in, walled up. That's really all I've spent on it. The rest of it has just been elbow grease in my time. Not crazy. You can do that at home and get yourself a space that you can work in over the winter and get it cleaned up. The biggest thing about this was getting this space cleaned. It's amazing how much this space got cluttered up in just a short amount of time. If you guys saw the shorts that I ran earlier in the week, or saw some of the clips in the earlier part of this video, you saw just how crazy this space was when I was in the midst of this, in the thick of this. And that was from a shop that I thought was actually pretty well organized and pretty well clean before I started. It wasn't. It was a mess. Things can get out of hand. You just end up getting enough stuff, and you have to go through the purge every once in a while to get things cleared out so you can get the space to work and get back to an efficiency level again to work. So a few days to get everything cleared out of here and everything back up on the wall, and we were in good shape, and I'm happy about where we're landing now. And now it's back onto more things with the cars. So we will be getting back into working with the cars, and that's coming up as soon as we can. That's coming up in the next weekend. So we are going to do a little bit of body work on the Camaro. That is one of the things that we have coming up that we'd like to get done. We're also probably going to be switching over to doing some regular maintenance stuff on the Camaro as well. It occurred to me realistically when we were talking, with Declan and I were talking a couple of days ago, that there's still a bunch of maintenance stuff that has to get done to the Camaro that we haven't touched yet either. The brakes have to be updated. The suspension has to be updated. All that stuff has been sitting there for years and years and years, and it's all rusted up. We haven't touched it. So all of that stuff has to get done too. It's a good time for us to start getting some of that stuff done. So he and I are going to go through and start working on an updated checklist of things that we need to get done to the car. And once we get that updated, we'll be coming back at it, and we'll share that with you, and we'll start to get a game plan together of what we do next. I am still not sure whether we're going to get the 350 out of the Chevelle before the end of the season here. Fingers crossed we will, but I'm not 100% on it yet. I need, to be perfectly honest with you guys, I need a couple days. This has been a week. This is supposed to be my vacation, and I have been cranking on this garage non-stop since it started. So I just need a day or two to come up for air and to get a clean think. And then once I can do that, I'll give a consideration to when I can get the engine out of the Chevelle and start working on that. But more for that, more for you guys on that soon. In the meantime, take care and have a good week. In the meantime, take care, keep throwing wrenches.